What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Jesse Williams, aka J Will, from the Dads in Timeout podcast, taking a break at work. The wind's blowing in the background, so this isn't going to be great quality, but if you support me and you like sports, then go ahead and click on this video and watch. You can check me out at J Will Sports Guy on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook, Jesse Williams, but I don't think you really care to follow me on Facebook. Anyways, let's get to it. I want to talk, leaving the NBA for a minute, I want to talk about the proposed 12-team college football playoff, which I think I had already talked about on a previous pod. You can go look it up. I don't remember the exact format. I definitely didn't have 16. I think I had 12. Maybe I had 8. But under the new format, it's going to be, if it gets approved, and it won't be approved for the next 2 or 3 years, it would be 12 teams. So 6 conference champions will be selected, and then 6 automatic bids. The top 4 conference champions will get an automatic bye. And just because you win a conference, a Power 5 doesn't make you automatically eligible for the playoffs. So under this system, for example, USC, I think, won the Pac-12, but they would have been left out. Or whoever won the Pac-12 wasn't in the top 12, so they would have been left out. So basically what's going to happen is probably the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12 will probably be the teams that get the automatic bid. So a team like Notre Dame, which has been talked about, will be, if they're independent, they won't be able to be one of the top 4 teams. So what I think will happen is you'll have to have 2 other conference champions in there, but then their seeding will be based on rankings. And what they would do is the first round would be at home stadiums, and then after that, so you'd have 12 teams. You would have basically 8 teams playing in the first round. And then those 4 winners would play the 4 byes in the next round. I don't know if that'll be home stadiums. And then you would have the semifinals and then the national championship game. So it basically adds 2 rounds to the playoffs. It would be like the NFL system, where the old NFL system, when you only had 12 teams as opposed to the 14-team playoff that they have now, where 4 teams would get byes. And I think this is moving in the right direction, but I'm curious because do we think that teams, 8 through 12 actually have a shot to beat the best 4 teams, right? So I think that more teams is good. But here's another problem. Let's say you're a 5 through 12 team and you win and get to the national championship game. So you have 12-game regular seasons because the NCAA is not going to get rid of games because of money, right? Because the NCAA cares about money more than anything, at least in college football for sure, right? And so then you could have, then you have the conference championship game, right? So let's say that one of those teams is the 5th conference champion that doesn't get a bye, and so they win their conference championship. That's 13, and then they play in the first round. That's 15. The second round, 16. 14. Game 14 would be the first round. Game 15 would be the quarterfinals. Game 16 would be the semifinals, and then game 17 would be the national championship game, right? So now we have teams that are playing just as many games as the NFL is going to now play in the regular season. I don't know if that, under the whole let's keep players safe thing, I think that just proves the NCAA, if they do approve this finally, because it's in like the second phase, it hasn't been officially approved yet, I think that proves to me that they really don't care about player safety. Do we think that the powerhouses, now I guess more rounds and injuries could lead to a year where, let's say, but see, the thing about football is different than basketball. Basketball, you lose a star player, you could be out, right? So Alabama, for instance, is so good that if they lose their best running back or their best wide receiver, The only thing that really would knock them out would probably be the quarterback, right? And if you have the offensive line that can protect the quarterback who knows how to get rid of the ball, then that's not an issue. So I just think it's interesting with this. I think a lot of people are making a big hoopla about, they're like, the SEC could get 5 teams. Well, here's the other problem. I know that they want to emphasize college champions, right? So let's say the top 4, okay, so let's just run a scenario, right? And we'll just pick random teams based on who's been good, and we'll just assign a record to them, right? So we'll say Alabama goes 12-0, wins the conference championships. They're 13-0, they're the SEC champion. Let's say Ohio State is 13-0, they're the Big Ten champion. Let's say that Oklahoma is the 3rd best champ, or let's say Clemson is the next champ, and they're, we'll say 12-1, but they won the conference championship like they did last year. And let's say Oklahoma is the best 2, and then they're the conference champ, and they're 11-2. So they lose 2 regular season games, but they win the conference. And so that would be the 4 byes. Then let's say Coastal Carolina and Cincinnati both win their conference, and they're undefeated, but they're going to be ranked lower because of strength of schedule. And then let's say that, I'm trying to figure out who else I want to put in here. Who have I left out? The Pac-12. So we have the SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Big 12. Let's say the Pac-12 champion has 2 losses also. But then you have a team like, I'm trying to think of a Big Ten team. Let's say Iowa, just throwing a team out there, has 1 loss, and their 1 loss was in the conference championship game. But now, because they're not a conference champion, they're going to be in the non-bye round, right? So they're going to be playing basically what would be known as the wild card round in the NFL. So it basically is putting emphasis on winning a conference, but not about games, because the biggest thing about the NCAA in both football and basketball is that all these conferences don't play each other. You have, every once in a while, you have teams that'll match up in non-conference play, but there's so many teams that they logistically obviously can't play each other. And so the problem becomes is you still have a system to where, now I don't know if they're going to use a computer or they're going to have a committee, and there's still going to be interests. And if you have the people on the committee that represent the Power 5 conferences, are they still going to find a way to keep these lower teams out? Now, and see, this is where I get into it, and I get into disagreements with people who are just like super underdog fans, right? Do you want the little guy to have a chance, or do you want the best 12 teams in the tournament or the playoffs, okay? Because tournaments usually used for football. So do you really want a team that physically doesn't match up against the big dogs, right? And it's great for smaller schools. So do you want Cincinnati? And I don't know. Like, I think it's good because we'd actually see, but we see this in bowl games. And then, of course, I do like making the semifinals in the national championship game is going to be a rotating site. It's probably going to be Dallas, the Jerry World Stadium. It's probably going to be Glendale, Arizona, Miami, Florida, New Orleans, right? And so then you could make the semifinal games rotating through the Orange Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, the Cotton Bowl. I'm trying to think of one that I left out. The Sugar Bowl, right? Kind of like they already do. And so you have 12 teams. Are you going to get rid of bowl games? Are we going to have more like 6-6 versus 7-5 teams in bowl games, which is great for the university and the players to play another game? But are we going to end up with a more diluted bowl system out of this? And I think that it's a good proposal, but I think that people are going to cry foul when 4 SEC teams get in because, listen, the Power 5 conferences get the best players. So if you look at the NFL draft, the SEC has the most guys. And I'm not saying, I think the gap between the SEC and a lot of the other conferences has shrunk over the years because Clemson has been so good. But if you look at the rest of the ACC, Miami hasn't been great. Mark Richt resigned. Florida State's been a dumpster fire. If you look at the Big 12, Texas has been off. They just fired Tom Herman and hired Sarkisian, which I think is a good hire. And then the Pac-12 is a rotating thing between, USC and Oregon and whatever other team you want to throw in there that has been decent in the Pac-12. I mean, I know Washington made the playoff that year and got blown up off the map. You've got Stanford, who's usually pretty decent. They weren't very good last year. Arizona State's exciting because they have Herm Edwards, but now they're facing NCAA investigations. And the other thing is like, we're going to drag this thing into another semester, and we keep wanting to call these guys student athletes. So I think that the NCAA is hypocritical. We know that. I love college football. It's one of the best seasons in sports, right? Because every game matters. So in this system, you add more teams, so you're going to have multiple lost teams. But in the SEC, you would have teams like Georgia, Florida, that lost. Like, Florida was going to go and play Alabama regardless for the conference championship game, but they had that silly loss to LSU when the guy threw the shoe. And I wish that guy the best of luck. I don't think one moment should define your career, but that literally cost him a chance to win that game. And so you have things like this that happen, quirky things, and I still think people are going to be like, well, it's SEC bias, whatever. I mean, if you have, and I hope it's not, I hope that we don't have 5 SEC teams in a 12-team playoff, but go look at college baseball. They had, like, in the super regionals, the SEC had like 5 of the 16 teams, maybe 6, I can't remember. And then you have other conferences that have been dominant over the years. But go look at the ACC. Like, that's the biggest problem with Clemson that people like to harp on, is who do they play, right? So Pittsburgh and Duke and North Carolina. Now, North Carolina has really come up like Matt Brown's doing a great job there. So I would like to see more of these matchups when it actually matters. I just think that we need to be careful on how far we expand this thing, because is the 16th team... And then here's the other thing. Are we going to do like the NFL does, or are we going to reseed it so that the number 1 seed is regardless going to play the lowest remaining seed, right? Because I don't know how I would have to draw the bracket up, but like, they don't want the number 1 overall seed to play the next round against one of the like number 5 team, right? Like, that would just, you give them a bye, and then, oh, by the way, you have to play the best remaining team that doesn't have a bye. That's not really a reward. You just got to take a week off. And then also, buys in college football, you're now rewarding those 4 conference championships from major conferences. You're still giving them a decided edge, because yes, they're the 4 best teams in the country, but it's because of who they play. And a lot of people will be like, oh, well, these lower schools want to really compete, they'll go join a bigger conference. Like, it's not that easy, dude. It's not just like they're like, oh, hey, by the way, we're going to go to the ACC. Like, there's a whole process that is involved in that, and contracts and TV and all that stuff that goes into why teams are in certain conferences and revenue and all that. And so I think it's good that we're going to have more teams, but are we going to see... So let's say the number 5 team in this scenario would have been Texas A&M, and they're going to play Indiana, which would probably be a pretty good game, but A&M definitely has a talent advantage. Or what if they go play Coastal Carolina, and we're like, yay, the little man's here, and then A&M, with Kellen Mond last year, goes and beats Coastal Carolina because they're actually playing for something that matters instead of some bowl game, which guys are going to sit out to protect their draft status, which I've said on a previous pod, is I'm totally okay with, because like, these guys are trying to go do a professional sport to make money to support their families. So all these people are like, oh, you're being disloyal. Like, no, like, they have millions of dollars on the line, bro. Like, what are you talking about? Like, college football fun, yeah, loyalty, all that, but you sitting at home and yelling at me on Twitter because I don't want to play in a meaningless bowl game because you're a fan, and it's not going to cost you any money when I tear my ACL and I drop 2 rounds in the draft. And so, and I might not ever be the same again. And so now you're going to have players like from Texas A&M that are seniors that are like, hey, like, we actually have a shot in this system to actually win. This one loss to Alabama doesn't kill our entire season, because if Alabama goes undefeated and we get smoked by Alabama, then we're out of it pretty much, because we're in the same division. And I just use the SEC because of where A&M fit in the rankings. Same thing with, like, let's say Oklahoma and Texas are really good, but they play each other, and Oklahoma loses to Texas, and then Texas plays somebody, and I know their system's different. That was a bad idea. So let's go with the Big Ten. Ohio State and Michigan State and Penn State are all in the same division. So you have a situation where if Ohio State beats Michigan, let's say Michigan doesn't lose another game, but they're in the same division. So now they're the 3rd team that in that scenario, because they didn't play for a conference championship, because they're in the same division, and now they're ranked lower. So I think that's good, that it gives, like, hey, like, you can lose one game. Let's say that Ohio State beats Michigan on a field goal, Michigan goes 11-1, and then Ohio State goes to the conference championship. Let's say they play like Minnesota or Wisconsin, who's like, I don't know, 9-3. And then let's say the 9-3 team wins. Well, then 9-3 is the conference champion, and so they'd be 10-4 now. And then Ohio State has one loss, so they're going to get in because they've been ranked the whole year. And then what about Michigan? Now they're the third team, and this is just an example. I'm not saying Michigan was this way last year, but let's say Michigan is the third team, and they're sitting there with one loss. So I think it rewards teams that have really good seasons, and like everybody can't go undefeated. It doesn't mean your season's trash. Now, if you get blown off the field in that game, so let's say in that scenario, Ohio State beats the brakes off Wisconsin by 50, then just because they played for the conference championship, you would still go and put Michigan ahead of them because Michigan had the better season. And so it's just one of these things that it's going to be interesting to see how it rolls out, how it plays out. I think it's phenomenal. I think it's great. And I shouldn't say phenomenal because I'm tired of Brandon Marshall saying that word on First Things First. But anyways, I have to get back to my actual job. This has been a video episode of Dads in Timeout Sports Podcast. Your host, Jesse Williams. Until next time, signing off.